welcome to another episode of What Nobody Told Me After 65. Well, it's your lady on the go, lady in the know, Miss Info. You've reached the Information Nation, where knowledge is shared and wisdom exchanged for the betterment of a people. Now let's get started. It's an election year. Everybody's talking about it, so why not go there? This is not a political station. This is not a political platform, but we're talking about something unprecedented that has happened in the United States, and so I can't put my head in the sand. It's happening, and therefore, let's talk about it. In the United States, presidential line of succession, if it falls to the vice president to succeed the presidency, this is only if their predecessor is no longer able to carry out the duties of the office. Now, this has happened 9 times in the history of the country, and it's been under a wide variety of circumstances. Some vice presidents, such as Calvin Coolidge, succeeded to the top spot during a time of relative peace and otherwise prosperity. Others, such as Harry Truman, was appointed to the office in a climate of war and political turmoil. So vice presidents only inherit the presidency under unusual circumstances. So let's look at some of the vice presidents. John Tyler was nicknamed his Accidency, not his presidency, his Accidency. John Tyler was elected vice president in 1840, and he was the running mate of William Henry Harrison. Now, this is long before my time, so I don't remember these names at all. Unfortunately, Harrison's administration did not last long. The president died in 1841. He'd only been in office 31 days. It was unusual circumstances that he died too. They never identified what he died from. But anyway, Tyler quickly found himself the nation's commander-in-chief, and his presidency was marked by tension with his own. At this time, there was the Whigs, W-H-I-G, the Whig Party. He vetoed bills that were proposed by the Whig leaders in Congress, and he began to advocate for policies that broke with the party line. Now, you know that's a no-no. As a result, the Whigs expelled him from their party, and some even called for an impeachment. That's the first time I heard about that. So, to further make matters worse, Tyler and his political critics, they saddled him with the nickname his Accidency. It was a term that referenced the fact that he had become president through chance and was never elected to the office. That must have made him feel very bad. And Millard Filmore was the last president who was not a Democrat or a Republican. When Vice President Millard Filmore ascended to the presidency in 1850, so this was like 10 years after his Accidency. After his predecessor, Zachary Taylor, died following another mysterious illness. He did so as a member of the Whig Party, which was founded in 1830 to oppose the policies of then-President Andrew Jackson, who was a Democrat. President Filmore proved to be, he was one of the last Whigs. They didn't want him, but he was one of the last Whig members to become president of the United States. The party largely disbanded a year after his administration ended in 1853. Many of the anti-slavery members of the Whig Party branched off to form the Republican Party. That's where the Whigs and the Republicans intersect. In fact, Filmore was the last U.S. president to belong to neither of the two major parties. He wasn't Democratic and he wasn't Republican. Now, Fillmore's successor, Franklin Pierce, was a Democrat, and every U.S. president since has been either a Democrat or a Republican. Of course, we don't have anything else since they did away with the Whig Party. Andrew Johnson was the first president to be impeached. Andrew Johnson became president in 1865 during one of the most turbulent times in American history. Guess what it was? The Civil War had just ended, and the nation was still rocking and reeling from the violent conflict that had caused the assassination of Abraham Lincoln. So, when Vice President Johnson took office following Lincoln's death, his principal task was the Reconstruction, that's when they called it Reconstruction, of the former Confederate states. President Johnson, who was a Democrat from Tennessee, was criticized by the Republicans in Congress for being too lenient. And he had started vetoing legislation that was designed to protect the rights of the newly freed Black Americans, the former slaves. The escalating tensions between Johnson and the congressional Republicans reached a crisis point in 1868 when the president fired Edwin Stanton, his Republican Secretary of War. He didn't go through the proper procedures. He didn't get congressional approval. In response, the House of Representatives voted to impeach Johnson, marking the first time a seated president this action had been taken against a seated president. That was the first time it happened. So Johnson narrowly escaped conviction by just one vote. But by the end of his first term, he found himself with very few political allies in Washington, and he was not elected to a second term. Now let's talk about Chester A. Arthur. Mark Twain liked him. Chester A. Arthur succeeded to the presidency following the death of President James Garfield in 1881. During Arthur's one term in office, he advocated lower tariffs for business and tax cuts for American citizens. President Arthur also passed the Pendleton Civil Service Reform Act, which made some federal government jobs attainable only through merit-based examinations instead of through the spoils system. It's not what you know, it's who you know. The spoils system allowed politicians to hire and fire civil servants based on their loyalty and political affiliations. Now, you know that's just wrong. Through policies like these, Arthur managed to earn the praise of one of the sharpest and most unsparing satirists of his day, Mark Twain. Though Twain was noted for his pointed criticisms of many politicians, he claimed that it would be hard to get a better president under Arthur's administration. Glowing praise indeed from a writer who once called President Teddy Roosevelt the most formidable disaster that has befallen the country since the Civil War. Theodore Roosevelt was the first president to he won a Nobel Peace Prize. I didn't know that. Theodore Roosevelt was vice president to William McKinley until President McKinley's death in 1901. All these guys are dying in office. During his time in the White House, President Roosevelt became many things: a conservationist, a trust buster, and in 1906, a Nobel Prize-winning peace negotiator. From 1904 to 1905, Japan and Russia were locked in the Russo-Japanese War over conflicting imperial ambitions in Manchuria and Korea. The war threatened to destabilize Asia and disrupt the balance of power in the Pacific. So Roosevelt decided to intervene and to de-escalate the conflict. In August of 1905, Roosevelt invited delegates from Japan and Russia to convene in Portsmouth, New Hampshire. They went there for peace negotiations. The president presided over the peace talks, and for 30 days before the two warring countries ended the conflict by signing the Treaty of Portsmouth. For his role in brokering that peace treaty, Roosevelt was awarded the Nobel Peace Prize in 1906. He was the first president to receive that honor. Now, Calvin Coolidge was administered the oath of office by his father. After serving as vice president from 1921 to 1923, Calvin Coolidge became president of the United States after Warren G. Harding passed away following a sudden illness. I gotta look this up. Coolidge was at his family home in Vermont when he learned that Harding had died and he needed to take the oath of office. While the oath is typically administered by the Chief Justice of the United States, Coolidge wound up going for someone less formal, his own father. His father was a notary public. John Calvin Coolidge Sr. had the legal power to administer the oath. The modest inauguration ceremony was attended by just a handful of people. And since it was in the middle of the night and the house had no electricity, the new president took his late-night oath by the flame of a kerosene lamp. Harry Truman had the first televised presidential inauguration. Harry S. Truman had been the vice president for just 82 days when Franklin D. Roosevelt passed away in 1945. After completing his first presidential term, during which he oversaw the end of World War II, Truman ran for a second term, the first to which he would need to be elected in 1948. In a famous upset, the incumbent president beat his Republican challenger, Thomas E. Dewey. When it came time for Truman to take the oath of office, the event was a far cry from Calvin Coolidge's candlelight affair. The inauguration ceremony was the first in history to be broadcast on television and was watched by 10 million viewers. Here's somebody that you know. Lyndon B. Johnson was elected by the widest ever margin at the time. Lyndon Baines, I think that's what the B stood for. Lyndon Baines Johnson, first presidential term began in 1963 under tragic circumstances following the assassination of President John F. Kennedy. During his time in office, Johnson laid out his Great Society platform, which included new social policies such as Medicare and numerous laws designed to alleviate poverty. In 1964, when it was time for Johnson to seek election to a second term, it quickly became clear that his first term had made a good impression. Johnson won the presidential race against Republican challenger Barry Goldwater by 15 million votes. That was the widest margin of any U.S. president election at the time. Richard Nixon later won the 1972 election by nearly 18 million votes, and Ronald Reagan won re-election in 1984 by around 16.8 million votes. Pretty impressive. Gerald Ford replaced a resigning vice president and a resigning president. Though Gerald Ford served as President Richard Nixon's vice president from 1973 to 1974, he was never Nixon's running mate. Ford was a leading Republican congressman when in 1973, Vice President Spiro Agnew resigned amid a corruption scandal. I believe that was Watergate. To fill the vacancy left by Agnew's resignation, President Nixon appointed Ford as his new VP. Sound familiar? Ford's tenure as Agnew's replacement didn't last long, however, because just 1 year later, he became Nixon's replacement. Following the events of the Watergate scandal, Nixon resigned the presidency in 1974, leaving Ford to take his place in the Oval Office. To this day, Ford remains the only person to serve as U.S. president without winning a general election as either a presidential or a vice presidential candidate. Now, that sounds familiar, doesn't it? I believe that's what we have going on right now. Anyway, it is what it is, what it is. Do your homework. Know for yourself who you're voting for. You know, things have changed a lot in the Democratic Party. To be fair, things have changed a lot in the Republican Party. I understand that former President Trump may replace J.D. Vance. Don't know who he's replacing him with, but there's a rumor going around it might be a female from South Carolina. Who knows? We don't know. These are politics, and politics and religion don't mix. I've always said that. And politics make strange bedfellows. Somebody said that. I don't know where that came from, but somebody said that. In the meantime, I'm thanking you for watching, subscribing, sharing. I know I'm not popular right now because I'm off and on. And you know, if you're not consistent, you lose people. So it is what it is. I'm not in it for the money. I'm in it because we have a conversation. And I love it. So send me your thoughts on the upcoming Kamala Harris presidential run. Unprecedented. People are coming out of the woodwork. And I was on a call, a national call for women, black women, to get information, to talk about her accomplishments and all the things that she has done and why she deserves a shot. I heard some pretty good things. The Democrats, those women, are doing a great job. So anyway, it is what it is. Remember, do your homework. Know what the facts are. Don't let nobody pull you into any foolishness. Know that you know that you know for yourself. And remember, you don't know what you don't know. Take care.